Okay, well, welcome back, and we'll start our regular session shortly. Our first agenda is our first item. We just finished our closed session, and at this point in time, we had the GM report, so we have nothing to report at this point in time. And we'll be continuing the closed session after the regular meeting for items 2 and 3 of the closed session. So now we will reconvene the regular meeting, and I'm going to ask our clerk if we have any requests to speak from the public. Thank you. And I'll ask our general manager any consideration for meeting requests outside of the district.
There is none, thank you.
Thank you. And our consent item consists of 2 items. We have item 1, the minutes of the previous board meeting, and also any leave of absences. So
move consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I suspect nobody wanted to pull anything, so aye, and that's a unanimous. That takes us on to the new business, the Doheny Ocean Desalination Project Program Management. And I will turn that over to Rick, and maybe he's turning it over to Mark. I'm not sure.
Well, actually, I think I'm going to take care of this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is the annual contract that we have for Mark Donovan and GHD. And just as a reminder, this started back in 2015, and it started as a 1-year contract that's renewable for up to 10 years. And that started out at a not to exceed $300,000. And we've kept it at that amount, but as the scope has increased in the recent years, as of last year and for fiscal year 2019, so 2018-2019, we increased it slightly to $350,000, and that's because of the increase in scope of work and the ability for us to have his support staff and sub-consultants work on these more intense aspects of the project. So this is a renewal in front of you for the fiscal year 20, so from July 1, 2019 to June 30, 2020 for the same amount of not to exceed $350,000. The good news is, as you'll see in the proposal, that Mark Donovan will continue to serve as a dedicated desal PM. That's important for continuity. And I'm not going to go through each one of these scope items, but as you know, Mark is very valuable in terms of attending these meetings and providing context and clarity, along with all the other stakeholder type meetings that we have to engage in as part of this project. So I'll conclude my staff report there and open for any questions. Thanks.
You know, I like to emphasize the importance of having continuity and a consistent project manager. We've all experienced what we call bait and switch in our experiences, and no matter which side of the fence that you're on, even if you're the consultant, have to pick up the pieces that you know nothing about. So we really appreciate the consistency there, Mark, hanging in there with us. Dennis.
Yes, Rick, on page 2, you have the overall task orders, and just refer down to number 15, the alternate power supply analysis, and that's shown as being complete, and it was done about a year ago. But as
Correct.
my understanding is that we're actually taking a second look at this particular matter.
That's correct.
And is that going to be one of the task orders that will be assigned for this period that we're considering tonight?
That one will be it's actually a sole source to a different company, but Mark Donovan and GHC will be involved in that, what I'm calling an updated alternative power study. So it will take their alternative power supply study as a baseline or a reference document and build on top of that. And that contract would be with a separate consultant.
Thank you.
You know, Dennis, one of the things I was going to ask our general manager to bring that to the board this evening, that the Burns McDonnell proposal, but they wanted to have the entire wanted to have the ad hoc committee, which is yourself and Wayne, review that in entirety before it comes to the board, and we're planning on bringing it to the board on the 22nd.
On August 22nd,
Yeah.
that's correct. Mm-hmm.
It's on your to-do list.
Okay.
So. Wayne first, and then Rick. Then Rick.
Well, as I recall, we held up this portion of the contract pending certification of the environmental impact report.
That's actually the next item. But
That's the next, okay. So, but in any case, we've got to move ahead on the regulatory permits, and thank you for that correction, Rick. So I'd like to,
Rick had a question first.
okay.
Before you, Rick, did you have a comment first?
Just a curiosity. So
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I was just going to move adoption or approval as in the recommended action. So,
Okay, well, wait. Go ahead and make your statement, please, Rick. I know you want to get something out.
Sorry, it's nothing too serious. Hopefully, first of all, I'd like to commend Mark on his excellent focus and if he doesn't have the answer, he gets the answer and he brings it back at the next meeting or when appropriate. As far as reporting your time, it talks about an hourly rate and how that goes through GHD. How much do we vary month to month? Just out of curiosity. And then under cost on page 2 on the second attachment, it talks about the key support staff, and sub-consultant services in there. And again, we're not to exceed 350,000, which is good. We put a ceiling on it, but I'm just curious in that sub-consultant and how you use other individuals and how those kind of ramp up into this kind of master contract.
Sure. It's funny. It's evened out. About half my time has been pretty consistent over the last few years. Some months have a little bit more, some months have a little bit less. So that 1,250 hours of my time has actually been pretty consistent. And then in terms of the sub consultants, those we have. I'll use one example: Katz and Associates. Until we have a big PR push, we give them money out of this contract to do, kind of as needed services. Same thing with like Butier Engineering, for example. Little as needed things with our kind of predetermined set of subs that we had. This helps fund those smaller as needed things as well. If that helps.
No, that's pretty much what I was figuring because
Yep.
I kind of flashed back to Katz and we haven't engaged at least at the board level in quite some time, and knowing what we were engaging when we were engaging it was maybe the cart before the horse in some degree. But now at this point, and going forward in the next year or two, it sounds like it might be time for them to kind of reappear if you're choosing or we're choosing to kind of continue to use their services.
That's correct. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we're probably due for another strategy session and then a kind of another PR push.
And if my memory serves me correctly, that the interactions that I think this board had or that I've had have all I was very impressed with them and who they brought to the table and what they presented to the committee and the board that when we saw that. So
Good.
I just wanted to add on to that. And the intent, as you all know, we need to go out there and solicit partnerships. So that's where the value of a CATS will come into play and helping us with those presentation items, et cetera. I did want to add one more thing. I need to apologize to Director Rayfield because this is August 8th and we're bringing forward this agreement. It appears that we were waiting for that, the EIR to pass through for that. But this was one of those cases where Mark hadn't expended all his money and was able to go past this point, and so we extended the time on the previous agreement. And that's why it's August 8th and it's in front of you today.
Rick, before Director Rayfield makes his motion here, did you, along the lines of, since CATS has come up the discussion, and the partners are on our plan-to-do list, what is our goal and game plan as far as timing to get CATS rolling, as far as to go out and to solicit partners?
Well, we actually have a strategy planning meeting coming up internally on August 20th. So we're going to develop that scope of work and approach with district staff and Mark Donovan. So we will have more information after that meeting.
Thank you. Now, I apologize to Director Rayfield for slowing him down in this motion. So.
No, I already made the motion.
Okay,
So
we have a
you
motion.
didn't slow me down.
We have a motion then.
I'll second.
We have a second. And do we have any further discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So it's unanimous. Thank you. And Rick, that takes us on to the next item, item number 4.
All right.
Again, Doheny.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So this task order 16, if you think you saw it before, you have. So this is the one that we brought in April of 2018. And it started with an amount not to exceed $150,000. And that was basically to allow us to start some of these permitting tasks. We needed to start talking to these regulators to get on their calendar and to understand clarity-wise what the expectation was going through this process. So that's been completed. In April of 2019, the board authorized the general manager to award a continuation of this task order 16 to pursue permitting for work. So it was in an amount not to exceed $230,000, and that was just for work to get us through the projected date of the EIR approval. On June 27th, as the board knows, we hit that milestone. So this is back in front of you to ask for the authorization for the remaining $190,000 to move forward to complete the regulatory permit application process. As you know, permitting is not. It's one of those activities that it could be iterative, and tasks could be added, more work could be added, but this is based on the fact that this permitting process should go fairly smooth in regard to us understanding the expectations and us going through the preferred regulatory approach, if you will, of this project. So what you see in front of you, the recommended action is to not to exceed $190,000 and with a contingency of $57,000. And I'd like to explain that contingency in this staff report. If I could reference you to page 2 of the staff report, you'll see the regulatory permits that are included in this task order proposal, including state parks, Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, State Water Board, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, along with the consultation of these other agencies listed as well. And this process would include the submittal of these permit applications and going through the process that follows that. As you know, that will be an intensive process in terms of responding to the staff comments, preparing briefings, presentations for these decision-making body hearings, along with other activities. The contingency, the $57,000, it allows the general managers flexibility. There's other activities, other auxiliary activities as described in here, including facilitating federal grants and environmental processing, along with other coordination assistance that the consultants would provide to district staff in moving forward with grant and loan processing and environmental compliance activities. And mainly we have the contingency in there because we don't really know exactly what these additional items will be in terms of requests from these regulatory bodies as we go through this process. So it at least gives us about 10% of what the overall permitting cost was so that we can quickly move forward without having to bring that part back to the board. So that's what that contingency is related to. And I will actually complete my staff report there for any questions. So thank you.
Director Kniff.
First, first a comment and a question. Just for clarity, maybe this can go to our general counsel. The final ER was approved, and then there was a window of time in which that could have been challenged by anybody. You could maybe give clarity to the fact that we didn't get challenged and where we're at and what the legal ramifications might have been.
Certainly. Actually, it couldn't be challenged by anybody. It would have to be challenged by somebody who spoke up.
Oh, we're part of the
mean-
public record, right?
Right. So, sort of an exhaustion of administrative remedies requirement. So, and yes, there was a 30-day time frame, and that expired. Unfortunately, we couldn't send up skyrockets at that moment because it takes time for the court system to reveal what has been filed or not filed. So it took a few days, but I think we sent the balloon up on a week ago Monday. So
Okay, good. And then the other was just really into the weeds in that the next the bottom bullet point after the regulatory permits, U.S. Coast Guard. What would we need from them? I'm curious. All right, we've got our expert from Kimberly Horn.
Yes. Good evening, directors. My name is Kevin Thomas, Kimberly Horn. Yeah, so U.S. Coast Guard is one of the federal agencies that the Army Corps, which is, we do need a permit from. They just would consult with all the different coastal federal agencies. So we don't anticipate anything. On other ocean desal projects, including slant wells where there's a modification of a diffuser, Army Corps or Coast Guard does get involved because there's a physical structure being modified in the open ocean. We don't have that, so it's another benefit of where we happen to be sited.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have for now.
Dennis.
Yes, when we passed the first portion of this back in the spring, shortly after that, we had a meeting with Eric Peterson, and he briefed Director Green and myself, along with a number of members of staff, about the process that we were embarking upon. And I had requested that perhaps we could get the entire board to get a condensed version of that briefing at some point in the future. And I wonder if the costs that are here include the opportunity to do that and to get Eric back here so that we can all get the benefit of what he expressed to Bill and myself concerning how the project would unfold under normal circumstances.
Maybe I apologize. Maybe I'm not completely understanding that. The costs would be contained in our contract with Eric Peterson. Is that where?
Different than what we're talking about here.
Correct.
Eric has his own. However, to go along those lines, I think we're going to have some discussions with Caltrans as well as the railroad. Would they be covered in this as well, in the contingency at least? Because we're for the transmission main.
Yeah, I'll give Kevin Thomas again, directors. I'll give an initial response. Mark, you can clarify. So we have separated out kind of the higher level environmental resource permits into this task order that tend to be more complex, more political, require a lot more effort with the public meetings. The kind of typical construction permits, those are usually handled by the design engineer, by the construction manager. So yeah, absolutely, Caltrans is going to be involved in anyone that we need right away from. Yeah.
What do we anticipate from Dana Point?
So that was in the list of consultation.
Yep.
So City Dana Point's local coastal program is set up to stipulate to allow Coastal Commission to oversee the Coastal Act permitting for both the onshore and offshore. So we'll have a single stop at the Coastal Commission for all coastal permitting. Dana Point, through the process, was, I think, generally very supportive and cooperative. So we worked very closely with staff to build into the EIR some mitigation measures, which were somewhat conditions of approval. So they have built those into the EIR. So they were very involved in reviewing our mitigation measures, our impact analysis. So we would anticipate primarily consultation. And there was a stipulation in the EIR to plan, check, review, submittal of reports for their review. So that's all set forth in our mitigation program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see any further questions. Okay, well then, do we have a motion? Did we have a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Oops, let me get back to my agenda. Just faded here. There we go. There we go. Okay. That takes us to number 5, which is the general manager employees contract for ordinance 227, and we're going to ask our general counsel to give us a staff report on that this evening. Art?
Thank you, Mr. President. The board has seen the staff report before. The names and dates were changed from the prior general manager. The tricky thing that's going on here is that there's a code section in the government code in the Brown Act that expressly prohibits the board from discussing compensation in closed session, even in connection with a performance evaluation. I've always felt like that was a pretty unnatural act to not draw some relationship between performance and compensation, but that's the law. However, there is a different approach that is available, also expressly allowed in the statute for the board to appoint a negotiator to negotiate compensation with the general manager. Incidentally, the general manager is the only employee that the board has that authority over. The general manager himself has authority over all of the other employees. The board can appoint a negotiator and then can meet with the negotiator in closed session to discuss the parameters for the negotiation, and then the negotiator or negotiators may carry that forth and then bring back the report, and a determination can be made by the board at that time on the contract, on his employment contract. But ultimately, the contract itself has to be adopted in open session, and certainly the amount of the compensation, various elements of compensation, will need to be transparent in open session before it is actually adopted. So that's some of those rules have been embellished recently because of certain scandals. While you were in closed session, some of the staff members and I were talking about some of the crazy things that have happened in local public agencies, unfortunately. And so the law keeps changing here and there to try to control that. So that would conclude my report. Your task now, or what's before you now, is to appoint a negotiators to meet with the general manager, meet with you, meet as the full board, and get instructions, and then negotiate the terms of the compensation terms, at least of the contract. It is permitted for members of the board to be the negotiator, but it must be less than a board quorum. So it may, up to 2 board members or a board member, as you decide.
Thank you, Art. Wayne?
Yes, I'd like to move that we nominate President Green and Vice President Dennis Erdman as our negotiators.
Okay, we have a first, second. I don't see any further discussion, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous then. Thank you. That takes us on to item 6, a resolution. It's Resolution 3-19 to 20, entitled Resolution of the Board of Directors of the South Coast Water District honoring Charlie Wilson for his service as he's leaving the Santa Margarita Water District. And with that, we'll turn it back to Rick for a staff.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is a well-deserved resolution for Charlie Wilson. Personally, when I was very early in my career, Charlie Wilson, he was held in high regard, and that was, as you can see here, 19 years ago, as a director of Santa Margarita Water District. He's well known to be collaborative, looking out for South Orange County. He served on the Orange County LAFCO for 17 years and has represented the interests of all special districts with objectivity, equality, and fairness. And as we all know, the most recent example being the Focus Municipal Service Review for the city of San Juan Capistrano's water and wastewater utilities. Charlie Wilson has also served as the chairman of the Southern California Water Committee and has done a fantastic job. If you, most of us who've attended those meetings, he's been involved with ACWA, the Association of California Water Agencies, Metropolitan Water District, Municipal Water District of Orange County, and has been involved in the Southern California Water Committee and the Orange County Business Council, among many others. And best of all, or most of all, Charlie Wilson has been a long-standing friend to this district and has worked collectively to ensure and improve water quality and water supply reliability in our region. So this resolution acknowledges those contributions, and we plan to provide this to the Santa Margarita Water District as well. So that would conclude my staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And Charlie, if you're watching, there were 6 whereases in front of each of those statements. So thank you for abbreviating it for us. We appreciate that as well. And I would like to move that we present this resolution to Charlie Wilson. And I will unfortunately be out of town, and I'm hoping that Director Wayne Rayfield will be able to present
I'll
that.
be there.
Very good. Thank you. So making the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Then we're off to item number 7, which are our agenda items.
Which is item J. But
Item J. Item J is now turn. Well, I better put my glasses on. I can't tell the difference between a 7 and a J.
we all have that problem.
Thank you, guys. Take care. So anyway, gentlemen, any items for the future meeting coming up here that we haven't already discussed? I don't see any, so we'll move on to item K, oral comments from staff. And we'll start with our Chief Financial Officer, Pamela.
And I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
And how about our Chief Engineer?
Sure, yes. What I'd just like to mention, actually, a few board members were here on August at this the presentation by EWRI. We had I want to acknowledge and highlight the synergy between our engineering and operations group on the presentation they put together for on our tunnel stabilization project. It was presented at the luncheon on August 1st to EWRI, a very good group there, very well attended. And we had Joe Sinacore on the engineering side, and of course our Joe McDivitt here to co-present the item, and I think it went very well. It was very well received, and they did a great job, and I just want to highlight that, and I appreciate the work they put together to make it happen. It was a great effort.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Joe. The Joes. Appreciate that. Takes on to Mr. McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. President and directors. And Mark, as I understand it, they've requested us to go to Honolulu and present next.
Actually, I think the president's going to go instead.
And one additional board member.
Oh, yeah.
I'll email you the
As long as we
presentation.
don't have a quorum. Huh?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, next, Joe.
I just wanted to mention quickly about Charlie Wilson, and along with all the great things he's done, I was talking to him one time and kidding him about the movie Charlie Wilson's War.
Right.
And I don't know how many people have seen it. It's a great movie. Puts Charlie Wilson in a great light. And he said after that movie came out, he won the election by a landslide. That's it for tonight. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you. And Doug, Dennis,
Nothing to add tonight.
and Art.
I really don't want to get in the way of the rule that you're working against tonight with the short agenda.
Well, we're doing pretty good. There was a little discussion, and Art brought it up a few months back, that short agendas generally generate long meetings, and long agendas are short meetings. And so we were put to task.
We're not done yet,
We were put to
though.
task tonight. So
I told Jody that it's
Rick.
not a rule. It's actually a federal law.
how about it, Rick?
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of items. I too want to congratulate Joe McDivitt and Joe Sinacori on a nice presentation. And Joe had the audience cracking up like he had us a little earlier. But most importantly, they did such a quality job. You know, it's a quality job when you're in awe of the presentation that they were giving and you work for that place. So, you know, they did a great job. So congratulations. And to follow suit, Mark Cerna is scheduled to present our Doheny Desal project in October at the Orange County Water Association. So you'll see those details coming up soon. And the last thing I wanted to note here is that we are working on scheduling this first of a series of workshops to look at the cost estimates for Doheny Ocean Desal, along with costs and risks and everything else. So and we're looking at the late September, probably October timeframe. So heads up, that's coming up. That notice will be sent out as soon as we get that scheduled.
Is that part of the peer review that's being done by Cal?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Between our last board meeting and this board meeting, I only attended one official meeting for the Water District, and that was MODOC yesterday. I attended with our board president. Just a note, Kelly Hubbard from WeRock has left her position to take a pretty big role up in Santa Barbara. So we in the South are going to miss her. Of course, WeRock is the Water Emergency Response Organization of Orange County, administered by MODOC. So that's a mouthful of letters, alphabet soup. But so at that MODOC meeting, it was it was pretty touching. She was a fixture in the community, in the area, and it'll be a pretty big role to fill, but I think it's a critical role, and it always reminds us that when we have good planning for emergencies and when we have good people in place, we feel confident that everything will go smooth in an emergency situation. So it'll be interesting to see who fills that position. I'm sure they'll go out and find some talent, but again, we wish her the best. And also at that meeting, the Met Carson project was presented to the joint boards and everybody in attendance, and it really, and in a nutshell, it's about reuse of water in a large scale, 100 million gallons a day, and it was quite fascinating, all the components to that project and how many agencies and cities and people it actually touches, and how complex and the scale of the project in the neighborhood of $3.5 billion, and looking at what Met is willing to invest in a reuse project at that scale, and of course, with OCWD, with Orange County Sand District, and the great work that's already being done in Orange County, it seems like it's kind of a sister project in LA, but a lot of great dialogue, including flow equalization, seawater intrusion, the connectivity throughout the system for redundancy, stranded assets, PFAS in the water and the wastewater. I mean, it was something that probably you could have a 2 or 3 day workshop on just on that project. So something for us to consider. Overall, there was some numbers thrown around for acre feet per year from Met in the neighborhood of an additional $150. But again, this is kind of they're in initial planning stages, so there's still a number of years out, if not decades out, before they're at any kind of an operational stage. But it was a really fascinating kind of surface deep dive, I'll say, because again, with all the connectivity and who needs the water and where it's going to go, it's extremely, extremely complex. So stay tuned for that in the next coming years. But it was a really good presentation by a gentleman, John, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Bernanowski, I believe from Met. So, yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you, Rick. Wayne?
Thank you, Bill. And I wanted to congratulate our traveling team of the two Joes as well. They did a great job, really. So please thank Joe Sinacore for it. Rick mentioned Kelly Hubbard, who I've worked with for years on emergency planning. And I should point out that my mic is off, but regarding Kelly, she's moving not just to Santa Barbara, but Santa Barbara County. It's not the city, and she's going to be responsible for all emergency planning for the whole county. So that is, as you said, a big deal. Last week, I attended a meeting of the this Southern Orange County chapter, I guess, or something, Aqua, related to Aqua. And they talked about a number of things, one of which is what's going on with the tax on water to support disadvantaged water districts throughout the state, primarily in the Imperial Valley, but not solely in the Imperial Valley. And Aqua folks seem to have a number of much better solutions than an across-the-board tax on everybody to fund or to help these disadvantaged water districts. And I hope our friends in state government wake up to the options that are available. Another topic that was discussed was also raised by Rick. PFAS, and it's a floral chemical that is in everything basically we used, from non-stick cookware to Gore-Tex weatherproof material. And one of its attributes is it just doesn't break down. Or if it does, we haven't lived long enough to see that it breaks down. Anyway, it's predominant. I shouldn't say predominant. It is in the air we breathe, and these chemicals are now thought to be in the water we drink and in our wastewater as well. So it's a serious concern for the wastewater, water delivery industry, and the science about this is just now really evolving. Wouldn't you say, Rick?
Yeah, I think we're going to probably learn quite a bit more in the coming years or months and years. And just a quick note, I did see on the news that unfortunately the bowls at Chipotle have found traces of PFAS in them, the bowls that they deliver your food on. So I mean, it's linked to cancer. It's prevalent in a lot of different areas. And I did look up on the national chart, and San Juan Capistrano was marked as one of the areas that they've found it in the supply. So I think, going forward, we're probably going to need to do a deep dive with this, and because it's an emerging concern. And again, this is something that's over the horizon that's going to probably continue to gain momentum with folks, and then again we'll see the Coca-Colas and Nestle's of the world tout how much better their bottled water is than our tap water. So it's another thing to
Anyway,
So
so we've got to keep our eyes on it, and it is an emerging science and a constituent of emerging concern.
Could I respond?
Sure.
Yeah, we are planning to bring that forward to the committee as an info item. But just so folks know, a lot of the concern has to do with areas that get base flows that are wastewater discharges, and they're using that for their water supply. In our area, we rely on Metropolitan Water District, which up to this point, all indications are good for that. And we also rely on groundwater, but that's fully treated by reverse osmosis.
Right.
So reverse osmosis is effective in removing PFAS, so is ion exchange and activated carbon. So I just didn't want to, I want to make sure that our customers know that from our water supply standpoint, we will do a deeper dive, but in terms of the risk on our water system, I would say it's very, very low.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. And I did not raise that to frighten anyone at all, but it is an area of research and a rather interesting area of research because these molecules are omnipresent, and it's not just, as I said, a water issue. It's an air, could be a air issue, whatever. So, and that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Well, the good news is someday we hope to have ocean desalination water that's treated by reverse osmosis, so we can eradicate any kind of discussion of that. But I've heard a lot about Kelly Hubbard this evening, and Jody and I attended the ISDOT meeting this week, and she made that presentation there, and she overviewed the Orange County Operational Area Agreement. And also ISDOT is, which basically through MODOC has appointed the representatives that the independent special districts has. Carl Seckel will be the primary contact now on the emergency. And then Mark Moaning over at El Toro Water District, Director Moaning, and also Joan Finnegan of the MODOC Director will be the third representative. So I think we're in good hands still with our MODOC representatives and the emergency services we have here in Orange County. Together with that, the ISDOT will be having their next meeting on October 24th, and Lisa Bartlett will be the speaker. That's their lunch and noon meeting. And then they were coming up with some thoughts of what could be future speakers for next year. And Assemblywoman Cotty Petrie Norse's name came up for the late fall of next year. But in January, they're looking to perhaps provide more of a service versus just an entertainment at the January meeting, where they will be probably putting together a ethics or a seminar on Form 700s or 460s and things like that to help the special district people with their, at least the electeds, and also the people that have to fill out these forms. So I think that's a good move, and so that's all I have to say about that. And not to belabor, but we are 50 minutes into this meeting this evening, and I have no further comments, but we are now adjourned to the closed session. Thank you.